Now the question is, if I do this, are you going to attack me again? Yup, okay. Welcome back aboard the polite ship, everyone, and what do you want? You had a chance to be in the intro, and you didn't take it. Anyways, today we're going to be finishing up my Disneyland vs. Disney World series with part 3. We're going to be starting this video with Peter Pan's flight. Now, I don't really remember much of Peter Pan's flight from Disneyland because the last time we went on it was the first trip that we took, which was a while ago. And this time we didn't really go on it at all since, if you know anything about Disney, then you know the longest line in Fantasyland is almost always Peter Pan. And since we have it in Florida, we didn't really prioritize it. But from what I remember, it does have a lot more detail in Disneyland. So I feel like that is going to make it better in Disneyland. So yeah, Peter Pan's flight better in Disneyland. Next is the Disneyland Railroad versus the Magic Kingdom Railroad. Now there's a couple things that make the Disneyland Railroad better. The main reason it's better is it has those indoor sections with the dinosaurs and the canyons and all that stuff. But the other reason the Disneyland Railroad is better because it also has more stops than the Disney World Railroad, so that's another thing. But the one other thing that makes the Disneyland Railroad so much better is that it was pretty much the reason Walt built Disneyland in the first place. He knew he wanted to have a train from the start in the park. So it's a very iconic thing, whereas the Magic Kingdom train is just kind of like, you have it in Disneyland and it's classic, so you gotta build it in Disney World. So yeah, the Disneyland Railroad is better. Next we got Mad Tea Party, which is better in Disneyland because of its location and just the scenery around it. I love how Disneyland's Mad Tea Party is just kind of like outside in that area, in that little Alice in Wonderland area, which I actually love that whole area of Fantasyland with Alice in Wonderland and then the teacups and the Matterhorn. I just love that whole area of Fantasyland. And in Disney World, it's kind of like just crammed in between Tomorrowland and New Fantasyland and Storybook Circus. So it's kind of just like a weird place for it to be. Whereas in Disneyland, it fits in a lot better. So Disneyland does Mad Tea Party better. Staying in Fantasyland, we're going to move to Dumbo. Now, most people like to say that Dumbo is better in Florida because it has two sides rather than just one like in Disneyland. And while that is way better for capacity, I also still feel like Dumbo in Disneyland is just better. Because I just like the location of it better. I hate Storybook Circus. And I also think that the Disneyland Dumbo is just more iconic than the Disney World Dumbo. So for that reason, Dumbo is better in Disneyland. The same, however, can't be said for the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. In my defense, I was using a pen, so I couldn't use an eraser. Now, the one thing that Disneyland does better than Disney World with this ride is that in the finale, everyone is actually an animatronic instead of in Disney World where it's just like everyone is a cardboard cutout except for Piglet. But aside from that, Disney World has so many scenes that Disneyland doesn't have. And I also think that might be because they have more space to work with in Disney World. Since in Disney World, Winnie the Pooh was originally Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, whereas in Disneyland, it was originally the Country Bear Jamboree, so you didn't really have as much space to work with there as you did in Florida. So yeah, Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, better in Florida. Now, as for Prince Charming Regal Carousel versus King Arthur Carousel, I mean, there's barely anything to work with here. They're both almost exactly the same. The only differences are some of the horses. And even then, they're not big enough to really notice. So, honestly, here I'm going to have to go with the fact that Disneyland's carousel is so much more iconic than Disney World's. So, Disneyland wins here. Next, we have Astro Orbiter. And right off the bat, you gotta give that to Disney World for the view. However, I do have to say that Disneyland is much more aesthetically pleasing. Especially considering that it's like the first thing you see when you look at Tomorrowland, so it's like kind of the thing that draws you into Tomorrowland, which is nice to know that something in Disneyland's Tomorrowland looks more pleasing than it does in Disney World, because Everything else in Disneyland, just Tomorrowland in Disneyland is a complete mess. But the view in Magic Kingdom just makes it so much better. Especially since in Magic Kingdom, there's 3 Dumbo-style rides in the park. So the view from Astro Orbiter kind of gives it its own identity, whereas in Disneyland, it's just another version of Dumbo. Yeah, Astro Orbiter is better in Magic Kingdom. Moving on to Tiana's Bayou Adventure, which you may be thinking, that's exactly the same, isn't it? Well, technically yes, but just listen. While all the scenes are pretty much exactly the same in both parks, there's one key thing that makes the 2 versions different, and that is how wet you get on those drops. I don't know what Disneyland's doing, but when I say there is a literal wave that comes over you, I mean there is a literal wave that comes over you when you go on Tiana's Bayou Adventure at Disneyland. And that alone is the reason why my parents and my aunt all said that Tiana's is better at Magic Kingdom because it doesn't get you as wet. The funny thing was, even though we had gone to Disneyland before and rode Splash Mountain when it was still Splash Mountain, for some reason, everyone was still surprised by how wet we got, even though we knew we were going to get so much more wet than we do at Disney World. And unlike everyone else who was on that trip with me, I personally think that it's better in Disneyland for the single reason that you get more wet. Because, you know, that's the whole point of a log flume. Also, I don't know if this is just me, but I feel like when they made Tiana's in Disneyland, they might have lowered the water level a little bit. Because the wave that we got on Tiana's both times, I don't feel like it was as big as the one that we got when we rode Splash Mountain the first time. So yeah, Tiana's is better in Disneyland. Moving on to the final entry on the list, Mater's Junkyard Jamboree versus Alien Swirling Saucers. Mater is going to win this one for the simple reason that on our first trip to Disneyland a couple years ago, we rope dropped Mater on our California Adventure Day. Okay, fine, that's not the reason. The real reason that Mater is better than Alien Swirling Saucers is because of the atmosphere. Like, just anything in Cars Land is automatically going to get points for the atmosphere. Don't get me wrong, I love Toy Story Land, but Alien Swirling Saucers isn't exactly the most aesthetically pleasing area of that land. Now, the one downside about Mater is that the songs get stuck in your head, but like, come on. This is Disney we're talking about. They've done that many times before. I'm looking at you, Small World. And at least for us, Mater has just like so many inside jokes we made about it, like the rope drop thing. We were like making an inside joke about that because it's such like a random ride to rope drop. Like there's so many other rides that would be so much better to rope drop, but back then we didn't know as much as we know now, so we just went with Mater. And also the Spanish part of the safety spiel is just hilarious on this ride.
Hola a todos. Por favor, para su seguridad, permanezcan sentados con las manos, brazos, pies y piernas adentro de sus carritos.
So overall, Mater's Junkyard Jamboree is better than Alien Swirling Saucers. But now that the list is finished, we're going to go back and tally up everything that was better in Disneyland or better in Disney World, and then see which one wins. And after tallying everything up, Disneyland wins by a long shot. Belle, I kind of need to put that away now, girl. So in conclusion, Disneyland has the better rides of the 2. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Disneyland is better. And because of competition from Epic Universe, there's going to be a lot of new stuff coming to Disney World that's been announced, so that's probably going to make it even better. And you know, while we're on the topic of Epic Universe, that announcement's for a later video. For now, don't get seasick. Bye.